Good morning. Good morning to Anne. Welcome aboard. I'm glad to have you here, Anne.
Good morning.
Before we start, just a couple of housekeeping questions. What we're going to do is, this is just a little bit, makes things a little bit more cumbersome, but we're going to mute our mics when we're not talking. So we always need just those few seconds when we want to say something to turn our mics on and off. And as we all get more experienced with this, it gets more and more natural as we go. Well, the reason for it is because I have trouble editing when there's other sounds coming in and talking over it and overriding our microphones. So bear with us if we can do that. So before we start, I want to name what this place, what this space is and what it isn't. So this conversation isn't a debate, and it's not advice hour. We're not trying to give people the what to's and how to's and wherefores of anything. It's just our own opinions based on the questions that we've got organized for this morning. And this also isn't a place where we're going to hurry up and get towards being clear about things. This is designed to probably raise even more questions in our minds. And this might even feel a little bit more like a coaching conversation since our Anne is quite adept at coaching people and helping them rethink how they think, and arrive at a more clear space for themselves. So what this does mean is that we're talking about curiosity, we're talking about reflection and reflecting, and we're talking with no pressure to show up to anything today. No pressure at all in any way. So we don't need to agree with ourselves even. We don't need to agree with anyone here. And we don't need to resolve anything or end anything. And we don't need to share anything that we're not ready to say out loud. So today's crew conversation is a continuation of something that I explored in a recent episode called I Didn't Miss My Chance. I Was Becoming Ready. So that becoming ready, words for whatever that is for each of us, getting ready for what? Well, that depends on where we are at that particular moment. And what we're focusing on here is the hard part that we don't always say out loud. And that is what becomes difficult to let go of when readiness starts to show up. Because becoming ready doesn't just open doors, it just asks us to release things that we've leaned on for a long time. Not bad things necessarily, not foolish things, but often understandable things. So as you listen today, I want you to know this. You're not being asked to let go faster. You are being invited to notice what you're still holding on to and why. So let's start there. So, good morning, Anne. Before I get to the first question, I'll give you the opportunity to say hello.
Hi.
So, first question for you. When you hear the phrase, I didn't miss my chance, I was becoming ready, what's the first thing that comes to mind that was hard to release for you when you realized that you were ready for something new?
Well, that's interesting because I never realized I was ready for something new. That was never even part of my thoughts. Um, I knew I was in transition. This may sound really harsh, but I knew I had to change or die. The thought of changing made me want to die. That sounded too hard. So initially, I was just doing what I had to survive. After that, after I got into, oh, this is what it is, this is how it's done, or I'm surviving, right? I'm not even sure if I had any of those thoughts about, this is something other than me initially surviving and then learning a whole bunch to know that this is a process. And one of the things that I learned was to trust the process. So there are certain things which it helps, and in psychology, that's reflecting on your childhood to understand where you're at now. And that has a lot to do with it, because as you were doing the introduction, what I initially thought of, what was the hardest thing for me to let go of, were my beliefs. And what was holding me up were my beliefs. And beliefs are generally inculcated from your childhood, and from teenage years and growing years and all of those things, those outside influences. So the thing about beliefs was I didn't even know that they were beliefs, right? They were just automatic. They were the things that I thought were my values and the way that I thought, and I therefore believed everybody else thought the same thing. Of course, that's all utter rubbish. So um, when I was learning coaching, when I was going to the coaching university, one of the things that my coach mentor was doing, that was what he was doing at the time. He said, "I'm challenging myself to become beliefless." And I thought, wow, that sounds neat, right? I'm going to challenge myself to do that too. So the thing is, when we challenge to take something out of our lives, or obviously to notice it, um, it's not that you become beliefless. I am not beliefless. I mean, I've spent years on this path, but I'm not beliefless. But in doing it, I learned what my beliefs are. And I then got to choose what I believe. I can't think of an example right now. But oftentimes it was about what my parents said. So I have my parents in my head, right? So what my parents said, and they might have said something about, oh, well, you've got to grow up, get married, earn a good amount of money or whatever it is, so you'll be happy. But I mean, that was obviously not true. And so it's kind of, okay, that's a belief that I had in my head. What is actually true for me, or what do I believe, and what do I believe now? And you mentioned in the introduction that, Anne helps you change your thoughts. Well, changing your thoughts has to start with changing your beliefs. So it doesn't have to start there. Sorry, that's the wrong thing. It does not have to start there. But I mean to really change where we're coming from. And that was how I was taught to coach, is where are you coming from? And this is me as a coach. I have to come from a place of authenticity and honesty, and I have to model all of that. And so the things that I had to let go of were all of the things that were actually fake about me. But learning what's fake about me is not easy. So I took the step of asking people for their feedback, right? What is it that you think of me, and all of those kinds of things. A lot of people can't actually do that. For some strange reason, I could at that time. Yeah.
Well, that's really interesting. Opens up a whole lot of doors and windows, the conversation. So I'm just going to not reiterate at all, but what I think comes out of what you've said is that maybe the hardest thing to let go of isn't the past itself, but it's might be that which we thought of ourselves, that identity that we had for ourselves while we're working through the reasons we want to change, or the things we want to fix, or how we want to be. And so what I hear you saying is that for you, you did question that all quite openly and asked others' opinion of that while you were working through it. And that maybe the version of, or defining what the version of us that was is that an important work, thinking about what was, but is it deciding that version of ourselves doesn't have to run the rest of our lives, that we can do different. And try that on for size and see how it works. So, Anne, I am curious about this for you. Was there a belief or a story or even a sense of something that protected you, where you felt safer to keep inside rather than release it? Even as that readiness, getting ready to get ready, as that showed up, was there a belief or a story that kept coming up for you?
The thing that pops into my head, I'm not sure if this answers the question exactly, but what pops into my head is I was worried about losing myself. I didn't know who I was going to be. But what I learned is the core of me, my personality, has not changed. So I'm still me.
Absolutely. That's a really powerful thing to hang on to, I think. And I think there's also a distinction that sometimes we don't hold on to things because we're stuck. Maybe we hold on to them because they're keeping us safe. Letting go doesn't mean that they were wrong. It just means that their job is done. It's complete. Time to move on to something new. And maybe we don't know what that new is. So I just want to take it and think about, for those people that are listening in to what we're talking about today, and dig into it just a little bit further. So one of the most difficult things to let go of, I think, is the explanation that we've been using to make sense of our life so far. That explanation not only to ourselves, but to the outside world, to those that are close around us. So not because that explanation is wrong or false, but maybe because it's no longer enough. So readiness, quote unquote, often asks us to release the story of being too late, or of not being the strong one, or the comfort of knowing who we are by knowing what we aren't, or the safety of disappointment that we've already adjusted to. Those are what I think are some common examples of, generic examples of what we might be holding on to. And some of the listeners out there, some of those things. And here's one thing that I think is really important. Letting go of those things can feel disorienting before it feels freeing. So that we're kind of waffling around in the mud of changing and wondering, okay, well, is this right? Am I to change to that? Is this good? Is this, all of those things, all of those shoulds. So, but that doesn't mean that we're doing it wrong. It means that we're doing something real. What do you think, Anne?
Yeah, I think that's real. For me, as a person who's an analyzer par excellence, I have to know, right? That was the first thing. I'm a person who needs to know, right? I'm a researcher, was a professor, all of that kind of stuff. So, and that is still as a fundamental part of my, I'm not sure personality, but certainly those strengths and weaknesses. I have a need to know. I will also say, before I get into that bit, that I learned that I'm okay with not knowing. I have an incredible story on that one, but it's very woo-woo. But so I've learned to be okay with not knowing, that I can be in the unknown. I'll call it the field of all. I now believe in this. It was a Deepak Chopra term I came up with. I found, not I didn't come up with it, being in the field of all possibilities, right? I don't know. But until I could get to that point, release my need to know, let go of my need to know, I first needed to know. And so I needed to know that, that past thing, the bit that we're the bit that was that traumatic event, I needed to know why and how and who and what and where and when, those things. And I realized I could analyze it from my own perspective and then find out about what it meant to me. But you can't do anything about anybody else or understand anybody else. And I have a favorite saying on that is, I don't even understand me. How can I be expected to understand other people? So, let go of that one. But that was it for me in terms of growing through that. And then once I got the other side of that, okay, I now know where I was accountable and all of those kinds of things. I've learnt as much as I have the bandwidth for at that time to learn what I needed to learn about the past. And, at various times you can go all the way back to the very first time you remember something and look at all of those things in the context of that's what makes me who I am in many ways. But then moving forward from that, then the freedom of that is to go, oh, okay, then that's cool. But I don't want to run on autopilot anymore. That doesn't feel like freedom. So I'm therefore going to choose, and I always have a choice. That's the hugely freeing thing. I always have a choice of what I do about a situation. Now, you sometimes get put in really yucky situations, and you don't necessarily have a choice about that one. But you have a choice of how you react to it and what you then move forward with. And so it was very eye-opening as to how I could then not do things, that doesn't sound right, but feel things, accept things in a way that probably wouldn't have been possible for me before, having looked at all that and let go of the past.
Wow. A whole lot to unpack there, and thank you for both sharing the personal and also for putting your coaching hat on for all of us and making the answer, not the answer, but making your statements relatable as we all are trying to noodle through how we can be in our moments of change and trying to figure things out. And so I want to just pause for a second. So in order to put a cap on what you've said, what brings that up for me is that I'm noticing that letting go isn't about a loss of something that we used to have and we don't have it anymore. But it could be more about no longer needing that proof of who we've been or that verification of what we were, but more, as you said, more about making that choice about what we would like, how we would like to live in our shoes from that particular point on, and questioning and living in that in those new moments. So I think at this time, I just would like to pause for a second here and talk directly to those that are listening. And when I've gone through my questions for those listening, if you can give us your comments and with your expertise on what I've said. So what I'm thinking is that we don't need to answer these questions out loud, those people that are listening in. I'm just offering these to think about, to noodle on. So for those listening, what belief about yourself has helped you to cope, and what might be limiting you now? I think it's important to define that for ourselves as we move through these new times. And then secondly, what explanation for your life has felt comforting, even if it's grown a little tight or a little bit like a fence is around you and keeping those feelings in a little bit? What's your explanation for your life in that? And then lastly, if readiness was already here, what would you no longer need to defend or hold on to or delay. And I think you've given us a couple of examples in your own life, but just getting people to think about for themselves, what is it that we think we need to let go of and not hold on to? So just to be aware of what some of those things are, and that sometimes the bravest thing we do is stop arguing with what's already changing inside of us. We wouldn't have the questions if we weren't already starting to change. Comment, Sam?
Yeah, I had to think about that one. Yeah, stop arguing. That's where, when I was taught right at the beginning of my journey, nearly 26 years ago now, trust the process, right? So just trust the process. Now, everybody makes up their own process. Because I was clueless in this entire area, followed somebody else's process for a while, and then another person, you read a bit, and you collect all these bits and pieces, and then you decide what's right for you. I'm a firm believer in you tailor things to your way. There's a bloody awful word that we've been using lately that I hate, which basically just means customization. So yes, because that's what fits with you, and everybody does that differently. What I do is to trust my feelings, and there was a couple of things actually that came up that you were talking about in terms of inquiries for people. And it's not about, I won't call it belief systems. I'll call it a coping mechanism. My belief is that all beliefs are coping mechanisms. We believe in this thing because it helps us in any particular moment. We can have a belief system, I'll call it that in this instance, a belief system that constrains us, generally because it's our comfort zone. It's where we're comfortable. And religions do a very good job of that for people. So for that purpose, they're really good, and they help people keep in touch with other people and all of those kinds of things, and you get positive feedback and stuff. So religions are very good for that, and they also have some constraints which people may not feel comfortable with. I had a friend, unfortunately now dead, who was a devout Catholic, and I had wonderful conversations with him. And he had the same feeling about being a Catholic. I mean, he was a devout Catholic, but he was also a very open Catholic, right? He didn't try and proselytize or, expect anybody to be any different. He just believed in following the way of God as he saw it, or the way of Jesus in his own heart. And that was wonderful because for him it was freeing. It didn't have to be constrained. And because he didn't put it on anybody else, like you should do this, right? Or you shouldn't do this, which is usually more the case. You shouldn't do this. Because he didn't do that bit, then he was perfectly free in himself to enjoy the freedom of his religion. So in the beliefs that way. So it's all about finding what fits with you, not worrying about, because you mentioned the word becoming ready. We're always ready for where we need to be right now. And I use beliefs as a coping mechanism. So here's one that I just used the other day with somebody who was overwhelmed by what is happening in the world right now. And I said, what I use in these circumstances, because I can't understand it, right? I can't explain it, is the Buddhist belief. Everything is as it should be. And I add a bit on the end for that for myself, which is everything is as it should be for me to learn what I need to learn right now. So that's my coping mechanism for a lot of these kinds of things. And I learned that throughout this process. So I'm never ready. You're always just in the perfect place right now.
Yes, as my words are, I'm getting ready to get ready. Because you're always in that constant state of preparation, right? Which is not a bad thing, I think. So I'd like to close with this, Anne, that becoming ready doesn't mean that we suddenly know what to do. It means, for me, that we're not willing to abandon ourselves in order to get there. We need to keep something of ourselves even with that change. That's okay. And the things that are hardest to let go of sometimes is what we think our identity is, what we think the timeline is. So there comes the shoulds, the explanations to why things are happening for us and around us, and that nothing is being taken away from us. We're just trying to, I guess, thank those things, put it in a positive place. Well, thank you for giving me that experience. And, now let me noodle through that and see where we can go with that. So we did miss our chance. We were just becoming ready. That's how I think about it. And that readiness isn't loud, like it doesn't come through a loudspeaker and it doesn't blare all over us. And it doesn't announce itself. Like when I said, well, I'm just getting ready to get ready. No, that's not. It is. We have to sit in that sometimes mud or those swirling waters or those unsure things for a while. And then it starts to become clear because nothing announces itself that it's coming there. It often shows up like quiet intolerance, if you will, for what used to feel acceptable. What used to feel acceptable. Now we might be a bit intolerant of that. So noodling through that and then coming out the other side with maybe another way of thinking. I won't say a new way, but another way. So if that is something that maybe is getting loosened within me, within us, where we can question or maybe gently resist that old story that we used to have going on around in our heads, and that it's not failure. It is us getting ready to get ready. So, Anne, you can unmute your mic. I just wanted to thank you again for joining me this morning and for helping us through another way to think about things.
Indeed. It's great. Thank you, Diane.
Thanks, Anne. And bye for now.